The worst thing that's happened to me since I came to Kalavan is, the morning of October 1st, 2022. I woke up to see my neighbor's dog on my property with my blind cat in its mouth, and then immediately killing her quite quickly, vigorously, and viciously. It was probably the most traumatic thing that I can remember happening to me, and that's saying a lot because I've seen some interesting shit. Uh, I I ran after the dog, chased him down my driveway, and as he turned a corner toward the house where he lived, he dropped my cat's now deceased body on the ground. Her name was Matit, which is the Armenian word for pencil. And I just sat there in the street very early in the morning, probably about 6 in the morning, with my dead cat in my lap. Can't imagine what that would have looked like if anyone else had been awake to see it. I was still in my pajamas, barefoot, shirtless, and just cold, sitting on the ground with my lifeless cat. When I brought it to their attention, the family that owned this dog, that their dog was now known to be dangerous because I had witnessed it kill my cat, my helpless little pet, couldn't defend herself, couldn't even see. They acted surfacely sympathetic, like, oh, sorry that happened. But they didn't really seem to see it as a big deal. I didn't expect them, of course, to, care about the cat the way I did. I understood these people don't care about their pets that way. That's okay. But for them to basically just act like they had no responsibility or liability, and that's just the kind of thing dogs do, enter someone's fenced-off property and murder their pets, and that there's nothing they can or should be expected to do about it, radically changed my understanding of the general cultural conditions of Kalavan village. Eventually, I got them to agree to keep the dog restrained, tying it up or keeping it indoors until it could be permanently moved out of the village, because at this point, it was only a matter of time before it would come back and kill again my pets or someone else's or someone's livestock. And so they agreed, of course, that the only viable solution was to either keep it permanently contained or remove it. I even offered to help them do this. I offered to help them find someone who would buy it even, so they could make some money if no one would take it for free, because it was part Gamper, a very desirable dog breed. I even offered to give them a replacement dog, because at the time my dog Popoke had puppies. And I even said to them, if you get rid of that goddamn violent dog that killed my cat, I will give you one of Popoke's puppies, your choice, for free. So you're even getting a free dog out of this situation. But you have to do this. I'm going to help you do this. I'm going to make this as easy as possible for you, but this has to happen. And then, they seemed to agree. Except weeks and months went by without any of that happening. At one point, they had relocated the dog to the next village down the road, but the dog just walked back. And then they kind of just said, oh, well, what are we going to do? Again, not our responsibility. There's not much we can be expected to do about this situation. At this point, I start telling them, your dog is returning to my property every morning now. I see it stalking the perimeter of my fence. It is only a matter of time before it gets back onto my property again and kills more of my animals, my rabbits, my ducks, or, God forbid, another one of my cats. And they seemed like they kind of just given up on the situation at that point. I told them I will call the police or animal controller, whatever the equivalent in Armenia here is, to let them know about this known dangerous dog that you're not taking responsibility for. They didn't care. I said, I will kill your goddamn dog the next time it comes on my property to defend my animals from it. Your dog will die if you do nothing about this. Do you understand me? They didn't care. At this point, I feel like I'm doing more to advocate for saving the dog than they are, because I'm the only one putting any effort into trying to prevent that inevitable outcome of it having to die in order for me to be protected from it. And these just incredibly irresponsible, careless people just couldn't be bothered to deal with this problem that they created by having an irresponsible dog. And the thing that finally worked, after months and months of arguing, pleading, threatening, even getting other neighbors to go and negotiate on my behalf, was I said I wanted them to now financially compensate me for my cat's life and the life of a rabbit that had killed too. And the figure I arrived at was $32, the equivalent in Armenian drama. I said to them, okay, if you won't get rid of the dog, then you are going to have to pay me for every life that dog has taken and every future life that it inevitably will take. Currently, you owe me $32. How much more do you want to owe me in the future the next time it kills something? Alternatively, instead of paying me $32 goddamn dollars, you can give me the dog right now and I'll take it to a shelter in Yerevan, and we will never have to talk about this again. And these people who ignored me for months and refused to do anything about their dog and showed no real remorse for the pain and suffering their dog had caused me and all the days of stress of it returning to my property every morning and me not being sure I would be there to keep it out, decided that they didn't want to pay $32, so they'd rather just give me the goddamn dog. $32 was a bigger pain point for them than all this bullshit they were putting me through. And as I put the dog into my car and prepared to transport it 2.5 hours to Yerevan, they said to me, actually, we have a friend in Sivan who will take it. Could you deliver it there instead? Sivan is on the way to Yerevan. And so these people had a solution the entire time this ordeal was going on. They had friends who they had already spoken to who would have been willing to take the dog and end this nightmare they were causing for me. They just couldn't be bothered to actually take the dog there, an hour and a half away. But since the dog was already in my car and I had already agreed to take it, they said, well, Gregory can just take it there. Gregory can sit in his car for an hour and a half with the dog he watched kill his favorite cat just a couple months ago. And so I did. And I transported the dog into someone else's car who was waiting for me in Savannah, and then I never saw it again. And that nightmare was over. But a new nightmare began, which was accepting the reality of the quality of people I've chosen to live among here in Kalavan village. Because I would never have believed that something like this could have happened before I moved here. It's the kind of thing that sounds like a dramatized exaggeration, because how could people be so awful and so short-sighted and so selfish and lazy to a neighbor who they've lived next to for years? But that's the reality of life here, that, and obviously not everyone is like that. Actually, a couple of the neighbors were quite helpful and tried to help me, negotiate and work through the situation. But the fact that these people did not expect that there would be any social recourse for this indicates to me that that's the general level of responsibility I'm dealing with here. And that caused me to seriously start to rethink my relations with all my neighbors. Because if that's the standard here in Kalavan, I should not be working to make these people happy and make them feel comfortable. I should not lower myself to their level. They should be encouraged to evolve themselves and reach mine, a level where people are courteous to each other and respectful and take responsibility for the damages they cause each other. That's the kind of world I'd like to be living in, and unfortunately I don't. Not yet.
Do you want to talk about the public response?
Yeah, the public responses I got. Well, I did get a lot of emotional support from people on the internet, on social media, when I told them the story of how Matit was killed in front of me. Cat that I'd raised for 3 years from a kitten. She had a horrible eye infection when we found her near Dilly John, and for 3 years I knew that she was the greatest cat I'd ever known. She was my cat soulmate, I called her. So losing her so suddenly was a big deal both for me and people who knew her, knew about our story, people who had come here and seen her, people who saw pictures and videos I constantly posted of her. A lot of people were very supportive. And then when a lot of people saw videos of me transporting the dog out of the village, there was an opposite response, a certain kind of backlash of people freaking out, saying, "How dare you harm that dog? He's just a poor innocent creature. Gregory, we're going to call the police on you." And just, if these people could understand the nightmare I had been through over the course of more than 2 months at this point of dealing with this goddamn dog who kept coming back to my property every morning looking for more things to kill. Me pleading with the owner, just do something to stop this. Tie the dog up, move the dog out, give the dog away. I don't care what you do. You just have to solve this problem or I will kill your dog and your dog will die. And I'm giving you the opportunity to save your dog's life now. And everyone turning on me suddenly when they saw that I was doing something about the problem that the irresponsible owner refused to do really just showed me how full of shit most people are. And that they didn't really understand the situation or the difficult, impossible situation my irresponsible owners had put me in, and how when we're forced into difficult situations and we consider ourselves moral, just people who struggle to do the right thing, we have to make extremely difficult choices, like one way or another this dog has to go, and I can't take it myself or all they could call the cops on me for kidnapping the dog or something, right? I mean, I'd gladly relocate it without their consent if I thought I could get away with it, right? I'd have taken it to a shelter the next day, but I needed to get their agreement first, and the only way I could do that was by asking them for money. It's unfortunate I didn't think of that sooner, but the only alternative would be killing it out of self-defense. But for that to happen, it would have to come on my property again and be a threat to my animals again. So when I finally found a clever solution to the problem by getting them to finally give me permission to take their dog away and again, do the dirty work of physically removing the dog myself and spending about an hour and a half with it in my car, somehow I became the bad guy in that situation because I was doing something to a poor innocent dog that didn't deserve it. When in reality, of course, all the blame lies with those shitty Kalavanian owners. I know the dog's not a murderer. I know that. I can maintain that presence of mind to know that even though I saw it kill the creature I loved most in the world, I know that it wasn't a volitional act. I know it didn't know what it was doing. I know it couldn't have possibly known that my cat was my beloved pet and not just some random prey to stalk. I know all that. I can't blame the dog for that. I blame the shitty owners. I was just doing what I had to do in a very difficult situation that someone else created for me because they wouldn't take responsibility for their own actions.
There are difference in how people keep their dogs around here compared to how you keep your dog.
Is there a difference in how people keep their dogs and their animals compared to how I keep mine? Yeah. Well, my dog Popoke is the only one in the village who lives inside a house with me. She's the only one who's treated like a pet. Every other dog in the village is kept outside, either permanently chained up or just free roaming, which can lead to some obvious problems, like if they get into fights with each other, which some of them frequently do, quite violent, aggressive fights that leave some of them bloodied and bruised. And these are quite large dogs. There are no small dogs in this village. They're big Armenian Gampers or big breeds because, of course, they're meant to protect the property, to scare off wolves or intruders. Whereas my dog, Popoke, I kind of make the joke sometimes that it's like she doesn't even know she's a dog because she sees other dogs and sees how they're treated differently and they act differently, and she's treated more like a child who lives in my house. And so there are certain things she does quite different. Like she interacts with people like she thinks she's a person. Or sometimes if I walk over to a neighbor's house, she'll follow me and she'll just walk into their house with me because she doesn't understand quite that dogs aren't supposed to go in houses because she lives in my house with me. And so it's always a big ordeal that she's the most human. In fact, I would even go so far as to say my dog Popoke is more human than the owners of that shitty dog who killed Matit. She displays more humanity than them because when they were given the opportunity to act like humans, show responsibility and conscientiousness and consciousness, they chose to act like animals instead. So that's kind of how I see them now, glorified animals. I think the owners of the killer dog reacted the way they did because they have been conditioned through generations of trauma to think that it is not within their power to change anything. They have a very, very low external locus of control. They get used to life working a certain way, and they completely forget that it is within their power to make choices for it to work differently than it does, which is why they don't have a sense of responsibility. If their dog comes onto my property and kills my cat, it's not that they could have done anything to prevent it. That's just what dogs do. That's just how the world turns. Snow falls down. It rains. The sun shines. That's just what happens. It's like an act of nature. And not that, you're a human being who's responsible for the animals that you take care of and the effect you have upon the lives of the other human beings around you. Right? Like that's a concept that simply doesn't exist for them. And in general, in this culture, it simply doesn't exist. People simply do not take responsibility for their own existence here. It's a very, very primitive way of living. And in fact, that was the title. I wrote 2 blog posts on the Kalavan.net blog about this ordeal with the shitty owners of that killer dog. The first one was called Primitive Culture Killed My Cat. A lot of people took offense at that title. Like, how dare you call these people primitive? Who are you to judge? I say, well, that's a very appropriate term to use here. I think it's quite primitive to live in such a way that you think you're not responsible for the way your actions affect the people around you, or that there's nothing you can do to improve the situation around you, to take responsibility for things. That would be a sophisticated, advanced, more human way of living. It's a primitive way to think that things just happen and there's nothing I can do about it. Oh, well, best of luck. Sorry that happened. It's literally primitive. It is undeveloped. That's what I mean when I say that the primitive conditions of the culture here are what allowed this atrocity to occur. And by me calling attention to it, I'm trying to make sure that it can never happen again to me or to anyone else or anything remotely like this, because people will finally be encouraged to take responsibility for themselves. So, again, the situation with Matit dying from the neighbor's dog came about 3 years of me living here. And I think that was the big thing that solidified for me that I cannot ever expect these people to treat me with basic human decency. Everything else up to that point seemed like a minor thing, relatively speaking. Stealing my tools, interrupting me walking in my house, ripping me off. That happened a lot, overcharging me for various things, people taking my money, saying that they were going to do things that they never did. And when I just saw the blatant disrespect from the owners of the killer dog refusing to do the smallest thing when they saw how much trauma and stress they were causing me, it finally clicked for me. These people will never care. They care about the impression they create for the public at large. They care about being seen as a progressive village because it gets them good press, it gets them government funding, it makes them celebrities in Armenia, but they just fundamentally do not care. And so I have to stop waiting for them to treat me like I'm a member of their community, because I will never be, because there is no community here. That's the fundamental truth. There is no community in Kalavan. These people don't even treat each other with basic human respect and decency. So instead, the only solution is for me to build my own community, to bring in the kind of people who will treat each other with kindness and fairness and maturity and respect and all those things that we love about human beings compared to livestock, things that only human beings are capable of, things that they promoted this village on, like entrepreneurial and cultural development and trying to improve Armenia and teach their kids valuable skills and all this stuff. They're not qualified to do these things. It doesn't exist in their universe, but I am qualified to do these things. And so are many other people like me who would love to work with someone like me in a place like this to improve it, improve themselves, and improve Armenia. It took my cat soulmate, poor little blind Matit, dying, and me experiencing the trauma of that to fully accept that. I had to lose something incredibly important to me to realize a very, very difficult truth. And now I will never forget that, because I will never forget that I am now living in a world without that cat.